Okay, so last week, I posted a reading vlog where I read Senlin Ascends for the first time, and I talked about potentially doing a spoiler review, and there was some interest, so we're doing it. So first I'm going to talk about my spoiler thoughts for this book, and then I did a community post asking what y'all wanted to talk about, so I'll read through those questions as well and add that at the end as well. A reminder though that this is a spoiler review, so we're going to be talking about spoilers. So if you only want spoiler free, I will link the reading vlog because I talked about it for quite a while in the reading vlog, spoiler free, so you'll get a pretty good idea of what kind of book you're getting into through that. So check the description for that. This is the spoiler section. So, Senlin Ascends. From the beginning, I was fascinated by the tower, so interested in it, and not so interested in Senlin. So let's talk about that. First of all, my favorite part about this book, my favorite element to this story so far, is the tower. I believe we will continue to ascend the tower. We will continue to climb it in future books, and that's what I'm the most excited for. I have fallen in love with absurdist fiction this year or at the beginning of last year. And while this book is not absurdist, it's not satire, it's not, but the tower is. It's each level, including the marketplace, is its own layer, its own style of absurd, its own type of chaos that you have to figure out how to navigate through in order to continue to climb the tower. And I was so excited to climb this tower. Even the marketplace itself, I loved. Now, my dad started this book about a week and a half before I did, and I've just finished it, and my dad's already on book 4, and he's loving it. And he said that the beginning of the book was boring, and he wasn't sold, and it wasn't until about a third of the way through that he got invested, and that was not the experience I had. From the beginning, I was completely invested in the chaos of the world and the promises of more unique chaos to come. I also just love the idea that the Tower of Babel, this is a normal world. Senlin is a normal guy doing a normal thing in a normal place, but the Tower of Babel draws people in. It's almost like this is an average world like you and I live in, but the tower is magical, and there's something about this magical tower that pulls unsuspecting normies in. And Senlin is the most normie of normies I've ever met in my life. And he too, along with everybody else in this world, it seems, or very large numbers of people in this world, is drawn to the mystery, the allure of the tower. And so here he is, a professor or headmaster, who his favorite class to teach is on the Tower of Babel, but his information and his perception of the tower is completely wrong. And so when he enters, even though he studied it, even though he has a guidebook, even though one of the core rules that he was quizzing his wife on before they entered the marketplace was, "We don't split up, dear. Don't split from me. We stay together." He's still so comically almost unprepared. And there is a little bit of grief that I have from that. From the jump, Senlin is a little bit too much of a dummy. Like, by the end of the book, I had accepted the role that Senlin plays. He is an average normie, a human who has entered a magical realm, a magical world, a magical tower, and he is wholly unprepared. He's brought his own worldview, his own ideology, his own sense of order into this, and it takes him a while to be able to accept the world as it is and start working through it. And he acts like a normal guy who's entered a magical world. So it's a very unique perspective because typically I either read from the perspective of someone who is acquainted with magic and understands this world already, or if it's an instance of someone being removed from the real world and entering a magical world, they kind of just like roll with the punches and get into it. And it was, while bland, while I do find Senlin very bland in the beginning of the book, it was an interesting perspective by the end to see just like a normal guy enter a magical realm or enter a magical tower and have to respond to it like a normal person might, which is not with the logic of the world and not with being able to roll with the punches so well. He is an incredibly passive character, like to the point that it's like, I have information on your wife, but I refuse to surrender it to you unless you have a heist, unless you do a heist. And so he's just like, guess we're doing a heist now. It's like, it's much passivity, which I don't have a qualm with passive characters, but like it's so much passivity, which he does eventually really gain his own agency and work his way into that. But Senlin he did not sell himself to me at the beginning because I think that he's too dumb in the beginning. Like, I'm okay with a character who doesn't know how to navigate this world, but I think he's too dumb in the beginning of this book, where he's like, we have one rule, dear, or we have like 3 rules, dear, and the most important one is that we don't split up. And then dear says, but I want panties. And he goes, no, we shall split up. So he breaks, like, the moment they enter the marketplace, he breaks one of the core rules and is like, you go get yourself some frilly undergarments, I'm gonna sit right here. And so she does, and then she's lost. Come on, man. But then too, it's not just that one inciting incident that happens in the first book. It's the continued dopiness of him until we really get the plot going. For instance, he sits there all day long until all of these shops collapse and leave. And so now he's just in an open marketplace. It's not chaos anymore. It's not a labyrinth. It's not an unnavigatable bazaar of shops. It's an open landscape. His wife isn't there. Day 2, all the shops pop back up again. They all set up again, but they're in a different order. Now it's a new labyrinth. There's a new order and structure to it, and now there's no way she can find him. And still he sits thinking, my wife is lost. This is inconvenient. When we see each other again, I hope she doesn't think our honeymoon is ruined. Like, there's still no sense of urgency from him. And it's not until he sees the wall of papers from people who have either been lost or who are looking for their lost that it finally registers in his brain. After 2 days of sitting, waiting for her, part of that time is being out all night in a clear landscape and she's still not returning to him, that he finally says, maybe this is bad. Maybe it's not just an inconvenience. This might actually be a problem. Like, dude! Like, I think it's too ridiculous. I understand no sense of urgency from the start, I guess, but 2 days of this and your wife hasn't returned to you and you see that it's probably not gonna happen and you're still just like, how inconvenient. And that there is part of that doesn't really go away for me. While I do like him a lot more by the end of this book, and I do like the growth that he got in this book, even at the end of the story, or near the end, when Adam reappears, Adam who stole from him reappears, and Senlin is just like, friends. We're friends. Let me tell you everything. Let me dedicate my time, my precious, precious time. I know my wife is potentially in a very bad situation, but I will devote my time for you and your sister, which awesome. I want you to do that. But also, sir, Adam has not proven himself to be trustworthy. He hasn't even attempted to prove himself to be trustworthy. In fact, he's proven himself the opposite. But Senlin is so determined to not be changed by the tower, which ironically he has been changed greatly by the tower, but he's so determined not to be changed in the way the tower wants to change him. He will not be isolated. He will not be, he will not embrace the idea that you can't have friends here. You're on your own here. It's cutthroat. He will have companions, and he will keep that side of his humanity of being able to trust and rely on other humans. He's so determined to do that he blindly trusts someone who has proven himself to be untrustworthy. So even though Adam ends up being a good companion to him, I can't pretend that I'm surprised when it's revealed that he was the one that sold Senlin out. It's like, yeah, he's proven himself to be untrustworthy. Shocker, he was untrustworthy. I don't know, sometimes Senlin's logic isn't really logic. It just feels like it's plot. Do you know what I mean? Especially at the beginning. I think in general, this book does rely on coincidence more than I really want it to. But getting out of the negativity, I'm gonna move on from that now, because I think my biggest qualm with this book is in sometimes it feels too much like things happen because plot needs them to, especially Senlin's logic or actions. Like, I really like the idea of a very logic-based character, someone who is an educator, who thinks in a very straightforward way, who isn't led by emotions. Everything is very black and white to him. And then we're in this world of absolute chaos. And I really like the idea of following that kind of dynamic, and I think that a lot of times it goes really well, but sometimes I feel like this incredibly logical character really isn't logicking very well. Part of that might be because he is in a very foreign land, a very foreign world, and he doesn't understand how things work, but part of it is like, dude, you've got the instruction manual right there. You know the rules, at least at the beginning, and you still choose not to follow them, and then whenever you don't follow them and something nefarious happens, you say, minor inconvenience for 2 days. I don't know. Anyway, let's move on from the negativity. Let's talk about the good stuff because I did love this book. So Maria is a character that I definitely wasn't sold on in the beginning because she disappears at the first chapter and her only character trait is quirky. I'm happy that we got the flashbacks because it helps to flesh her character out a little bit more, but I have my suspicions about her because, first of all, she got lost, and instead of seemingly trying to find him or staying in one spot to wait for him to try to find her so that when all the shops collapse and leave, she can also see him because now it's just an open landscape, which of course she didn't know that all the shops would collapse and leave in the evening. But you know what I mean? Instead of trying to find him, it seems like she just immediately entered the tower, which is a little bit sus because she wasn't kidnapped in the beginning. She wasn't kidnapped until she got to floor 3 and trusted people that she should not have been trusted. Like, come on. It's obvious that he's sus, but I understand that you're also desperate. But like, she didn't seem so determined to find him. So I do wonder if some of that is the whimsy of her, where she's just extra drawn to the tower, or where she's like, ooh, I'm just gonna go on an adventure. And so she starts participating in a play and doing all the things that you do in the tower. Or how much of it is more? because obviously, so here's the thing. Okay, let me just tell you my theory. So there's this chapter, it's chapter 3. It's the very beginning of chapter 3. And it starts off with them just lying in bed, chilling and talking. And then she starts asking him about the tower. Tell me, Tom, how deep is the well beneath the tower? He said 6,000 feet, as I recall. She said 6,000 feet? If the well was wide enough to drop the tower into... Senlin interrupted, stuttering. Impossible. The well would collapse if it... Maria pressed on in a voice hardly above a whisper. If it were wide enough, would the tower be tall enough to fit in the well? He considered it. It's possible, I suppose, if there are 30 levels at 100 feet apiece. It's possible, she said, her mouth nearer his blushing ear. Possible, he confirmed. And then the scene ends. So the scene begins with, we're lying in bed talking. She starts asking very targeted questions. He agrees it's possible, but probably not gonna happen. And then the scene ends, and then we move on. This scene feels completely useless. It feels entirely pointless. So it must have a purpose. And so my first thought is, okay, what's up with this well? What's up with the well? This is a magical tower. The well could be wider than the tower itself and yet somehow still supporting it. So what's up with the well? But then I'm like, well, what's up with Maria? Because she's a little bit sus. You know what I mean? Like, her actions seem suspicious. She obviously doesn't understand the tower completely because she did get swindled. She did get hoodwinked into trusting this fella who said he would help her find her husband and then ended up selling her. So she's not privy necessarily to the mysteries of the tower, but her actions don't work for me entirely. And that scene has me kind of looking at her like, what do you know? Is Maria gonna betray him? Is he gonna find her and then it turns out that she like left on purpose and lured him into the tower? Maybe her whole story about being kidnapped and sold. I mean, is it a lie? Did she tell a story to the painter that is not entirely truthful and in fact she's in on things? And the reason, I mean, like, they have a interesting dynamic anyway. She's a lot younger than him. She's like very whimsical and flighty and fun, and he's more stiff, which of course that personality those personality traits can fit together wonderfully, so that's not what I'm saying. In fact, that's essentially the personality traits of my brother and sister-in-law. So awesome. It totally works. But she was the one that pursued him, and she was a student. So did she position herself in his life and then start pursuing him to lure him to the tower? I mean, like, I don't know. I'm just saying, I've got my eyes on her, and I'm not, the fact that we didn't find her in this book and that we have to keep rising the ranks, and a couple of small things throughout the little bit of information we get from her, I'm just watching her. That's all I'm saying. I'm just curious about her, or about this well. Either Marya or the well. That scene was pointless, so I'm watching it closely. And I guess on that note, we could talk about how basically everything in this book does seem to be quite intentional. While I do think there are plot elements that do read clunky, while I do think the execution is sometimes a little bit forced for things, I think that the author, Josiah Bancroft, does a fantastic job of being very intentional with the clues he leaves. So this plot, the story, the tower, the way it functions is obviously all far more intentional than I guessed. I mean, I could tell that there was an intentionality to it, and it did seem like it was, like, especially in floor 3 when he just basically became complacent. You know, he went through these floors of things that would try to trap him, being stuck in the basement with addiction and with just continuing to have the supply of beer as they work. And then the parlor where he could potentially be trapped in this play, getting lost in the role, either being invested in the role or trapped because he continually forgets to light the fireplaces. And then we have the 3rd floor where, again, he's trapped, this time through sloth, through being lazy and being indulgent and being pampered, and, you know, the cushy lifestyle that is the 3rd floor. Like, each floor is trying to trap you, right? And so it was especially clear to me in the 3rd floor, because I've read plenty of stories that have utilized this tool of, like, an indulgence or a pampering or a, you know, something that would make you want to just stay here forever and kind of just lose track of time and life and that sort of thing. So, like, that was very obvious to me. And so then it's like, okay, so all of these floors, the intentionality is very clear, and the clues are there to where you can see these things are connected, or you can see there's something intentional happening here. Or like the heavy focus on the painting, you can kind of surmise that this painting is going to hold a much greater purpose to the story before you actually find out that this painting is going to hold a really big purpose. Stuff like we learn about the people who sell women to be wives, sell them. We learn about that long before we hear Marya's story, so, you know, you can kind of guess, oh, that's probably the fate that Marya had, right? And then the fact that they say women basically just float to the top of the tower, like, okay, so we know we're not going to stop at the 3rd floor. So he does a really good job. While I have my complaints about the execution every now and then for the way things play out, he does an excellent job of laying clues so that when things do come together and do fall into place, it's like, oh, yeah, that makes complete sense. And I did love the reveal whenever Senlin, which it is his idea at this point, like Senlin, this is his guess that the tower is basically an engine, and each floor is functioning to serve this engine, to keep it running, to keep it moving, and they're all connected in that way, and I love that. Especially because this has such a steampunky vibe to it. It all being an engine is definitely interesting to me. So I think this book did an excellent job, even though I don't think the initial plot of man loses wife, man must overcome obstacles to find wife, you know, that's not a very interesting plot. And the plot is chaos, even though, like, that plot line sounds very boring and tired. Oh my goodness, how many books have I read where wife is either stolen away or lost or killed at the beginning, and then man's entire motivation is either go find wife, revenge wife, sad boy because of wife. Like, oh my goodness, have I read this story a million times. Even though that sounds very bland and generic and tired and overdone, it ends up being so much more than that. And it's so action-packed. Like, it's constantly moving because of the absurdity of each floor and because of the different tasks that he has to accomplish in order to get to the next floor. And then once he becomes a more intentional character and once he really starts taking agency and becoming more cutthroat and becoming more intentional, then it gets so intense. So like there's a lot going on in what seems like that's why in my spoiler free, when I was talking in the reading vlog, why I said like this is the plot, but hold to it loosely. Don't really think that much of it because doesn't. Meh. And it's because to speak of this book spoiler free is to make it sound like something that it's not, because it's so much more than that. And Senlin's character is really interesting to me too, because he starts off so bland and boring and passive and then turns so much more intentional. So it's so much more like, I don't know, intense and even, I don't know. It's interesting to me because his character could go any way. He has such a strong and big arc just in this first book that it's like, okay, so where could he go from here? But the answer is anywhere. He's getting more cutthroat and he's getting more intentional. And there are lines in the book where he's like, I would never turn into this, which is like always a signal for, oh, he might turn into that exact thing. So like he could have a corruption arc. He could turn dark and then have to get a redemption or have to like rebalance himself. He's already got so much influence by the end of this book. He has a freaking crew that he's about to travel with, you know, like he's assembled a crew and he has influence on these people. He's already done so much. He's already fought so many nefarious, awful people that it's like he's already so much stronger and more intentional and so much more of a threat that he could continue in that vein. He's already, as he holds on to this painting, he's already thinking about his wife more as a concept and more as an ideal as opposed to the person that he's fallen in love with. And I really think that especially that particular thing is the Tower's influence on the people, because like, for instance, this one book took place over approximately 6 months. Especially the bath took forever because he just accepted this role of go bounce from hotel to a hotel asking about my wife every single day, even when they can tell that this is just a ruse, that this is not what I'm saying. My wife checked in. Oh, is this the wrong hotel? Even when they can see through that, he continues that routine. Go from hotel to hotel to ask about my wife, drink with my pal at night. And that becomes his routine forever. For so long, which is what the third floor is. That's the point of the third floor, is to waste your time to get you trapped here, just like his drinking pal was for 16 years. So it's like, I think part of what this tower does, it strongly affects you as a person and your perception of the world. Like Senlin, throughout this book, there's almost a sense of like purposeful lack of purpose or purposeful lack of urgency, where I guess this is kind of like me fighting with earlier Murphy in this video, where I have a problem with him not having any sort of urgency for his wife and not picking up on, hey, this is a threat. But then later on, and I don't know if that was him or if that was the tower, but then later on he continues in that thread where he gets caught up in all these side quests and all these tasks that he's supposed to fulfill, like being in a play or going on a heist or whatever. And it's almost like he sometimes is just doing what he's doing to pursue his wife because he's supposed to and not because he desperately misses her and he's afraid for her. And it's almost like it's a logical thing and not an emotional thing at all. And I wonder if that's the tower that's trying to steal that urgency from him and force that complacency on him to trap him. And so by the end, when he acknowledges she's kind of become more of a concept to me, I feel like that's the tower that's removing those things from him and forcing him into this isolation that it's been trying to force him into throughout the entire story. I don't know. I have a lot of ideas and confirmation on basically nothing. But I'm really, really interested in Violetta, Adam's sister. I'm super thrilled that she's their lookout. Is that what she was? Or navigator? She's on his crew. So I think that she has potential to be a really fascinating character, and I'm really excited to get to know her better in future books. Edith is a character I'm very curious about, especially because she's got that arm now, and book 2 is Arm of the Sphinx with the arm in the tower. It was him in the tower climbing, trying to get higher, and now it's the arm. So I feel like it's gotta be her. I'm also curious if the drinking buddy, whose name I don't remember, I'm really curious if he's going to come back in future books, because he chose to become a hog in order to save Senlin, but then book 3 or 4, one of them is called the Hog King. So like, is Senlin going to become the king of the hogs? Like, is he going to, I don't know, are we gonna see him again? The girl, Irene, I think is her name, the one that he taught to read and who taught him to fight, I'm curious to get to know her better. She's pretty interesting. Really, just generally, my opinion of every character in this book so far is, okay, you have potential. I'm excited to get to know you more. There's no character that I'm attached to. There's no character that if they died, I'd say, aw, I liked you. I don't have that for it. Like, literally kill Senlin. I'm fine. I really don't feel attached to anyone at this point, but I see a lot of potential in basically everyone. So I'm really, really hopeful that I'm going to get to know characters better. We're gonna have a deepening of relationships among them, and I'm gonna get attached. Because really it's the characters that I'm missing the most from this book. So I really, really hope we get that in book 2. Okay, I actually have to leave in 10 minutes. So let's get to what y'all wanted to talk about. I would love a discussion about the brilliant way it's written and the themes. It's been a year and a half since I read this one, but I just remember being so impressed by the writing, creativity, and themes. So I have spent some time talking about how things feel coincidental or feel a little bit too like forced at times, which is, I mean, it's true, it's how I feel. But I do think that as far as prose wise, this is phenomenally written. I lost his name again, Bancroft. I love Bancroft's prose. He does an excellent job of writing fantasy in a very whimsical way, which is very important. I think with more whimsical books or whimsical magics within books, more soft magic systems, I think that the prose is more important, because the prose really needs to reflect that whimsy and that elusiveness, and he does that perfectly. He also does a really good job. There's a lot of real life parallels in this book. There's a lot of pieces of discussion. It's very themes driven, and with all that, he does such a great job of wording things in a way that makes you pause and say, oh, hang on, I need to actually think about that sentence. And this is a book that could cause a ton of discussion. And I do think that I'm definitely going to continue on with the series, and assuming I finish the series, which I think I will, I definitely want to have a couple other booktubers on here and discuss it as a whole, and hopefully we can dig into that some more. Because this is a book where I feel like different people could get different themes out of it because of Bancroft's ability to not be heavy-handed and not be too on the nose. So his themes, the book is very themes focused without holding anyone's hand, which means that people can pull different things from it based off of their own world perspectives, world views, based off of their own personal life experiences. And I think that those are the most fun books to discuss, and it's always fun when fantasy does that sort of thing. So I think Bancroft, while I have a couple of nitpicks about the plot writing, even though I think that it was a very fun, interesting book, while I do have some nitpicks there, I think that his ability in prose and in the way he balanced themes with the story was, impeccable. Oh, and I didn't even talk about this, but I also really, really loved that the beginning of every chapter had a passage from the handbook to Babel, whatever that was called, and Every Man's Guide to Babel or something. And it was, a lot of times what was said in the passage and then what happened in the chapter were basically blatant contradictions, and the handbook was so unhelpful. And so about midway through the book, Senlin just started writing his own book, and we started seeing passages of a more real look into what was going on in the tower. I loved that, and I'm excited to do more with that in the future. I don't know, there's just a lot of things that you could read into and that you could parallel and you could discuss more fully, and I definitely want to do that with other booktubers as I get deeper into the book, because I think that the themes will solidify even more in future books, and there will be more to discuss. I would love to see a discussion on what do you think of the tower itself and the mysteries behind the plot. I mean, I talked about that a little bit, I guess, but I mean, the tower itself, you've got the parallels of the Tower of Babel from the Bible, where you have the people who are building up this tower to try to reach heaven, and then their languages are scrambled, and then they aren't able to work together anymore. And then you have this tower that's so tall in the book, and we don't know exactly how tall, but it's above the clouds, and what I see from the tower is that it's continually trying to isolate people, it's trying to separate people, it's trying to remove the ability to work together to ascend the tower, or I assume that's the goal. They don't want you to ascend the tower, but I don't know. But then you also have stuff like addictions and slothenness or laziness, and you have indulgence, and you have certain things that the tower tries to trap you with. So there's definitely some parallels, there's some references, the fact that they use like shackles as their currency, or Enoch is the town that he's from. Like lots of biblical references, as well as a lot of real life problems and darkness. And that's another, in my opinion, checkmark for the author's writing, that he really went dark with this world, but he didn't rub your nose in it. He didn't try to make it super edgy and like that was the goal. He made clear what was going on without needing to, with allowing you to know what's going on without needing to put you right in the middle of it, which is certainly the way I would want to read a story with this kind of darkness. So I think he did a good job in that. I don't know what's behind the tower though. I don't know what is waiting for us. I really don't have any theories about that. I have individual theories for characters like Edith, or like maybe the well, there's something going on there. But like, I don't know as far as what the purpose of the tower is, what the goal of the tower is, other than like it's possible that there's someone at the top that's trying to lure people in to use them, you know, like we see them being used to power the tower for his own purposes. But what's that purpose? I don't know. So I have a lot of, I don't know. I really want to find out though. So a lot of these questions of things that y'all wanted to talk about are things that I've already addressed, like wanting to know my pros and cons, wanting to discuss the characters and the different ringdoms, the different levels, talking about character arcs. So lots of questions actually on here that we've already discussed. Yeah, so I think those are the two comments that address something specifically that I didn't address on my own, which works out because I need to leave in 2 minutes. I think that there's a lot more to discuss about this book, about the characters, about plot points, about the action and the things that happen and the implications of what's to come that I didn't cover, but there's so much that happens in this book that it's kind of difficult to talk about it all in just one video. But I'm for sure continuing on with book 2 in January, and I'm really, really hopeful that some of the things that didn't work so well for me will either come together in a way that I'm satisfied with them, like for instance, Senlin kind of seeming like a dope if the book really does lean on the tower affects you and pulls from you, and so your sense of urgency, sense of logic, sense of whatever really is dulled, even so far as in the marketplace when you very first come near the tower, then that would be cool. Or especially, I think my main desire from book 2 is 1, to explore the tower more, 2, to see how the tower functions and see more of how it all works together within itself, and 3, I'd really, really love more depth from the characters, to get to know them better, to see them interact more, and to just care about them more. But yeah, anyway, I loved this book. I thought that it was fantastic. I had a lot of fun reading it, and especially based on my dad's enjoyment of the series, I'm really hopeful that I will also just like it more and more with each book. So I would love to hear from you. I'd love to talk with you more about things that I didn't mention, plot points. If you want to dig into the themes a little bit more, I definitely want to dig into the themes more as I progress the story, because I do think that it'll come together more, and I don't really want to like just make guesses, as it feels like this is very much a lot of ground laying is happening. But I'd love to discuss it more with you. Just please keep it spoiler free for future books. Please only discuss book 1, because I would like to be able to participate in the comments. I want to be able to read them, so I don't want to get spoiled. But I'm excited to continue on with book 2, and yeah, let me know what you thought about the book if you've read it. I post videos every Tuesday and Thursday on this channel, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the main channel, which is linked in the description of this video. I'll see you again soon. Bye.